guys, welcome back. I'm going to do a new video today on a refret, beginning to end, on a 73 Stratocaster neck. Maple fingerboard, so we're going to be a little careful with the finish on the surface because it is in pretty good nick. And yeah, tell you all about it, and let's get it done. Well, step one is obviously removing frets. And when we're dealing with maple, we need to consider the lacquer that's on the fingerboard. So what we do is we score with a blade on either side of the fret, just like that, to just break the surface of the lacquer. Now this particular guitar hasn't got as much of a thick fillet on the side of the frets as some of the modern Fenders do have. It's really like thick on some of them, and it's almost impossible to get fret pullers in properly under the frets. So you've really got to do this. Sometimes you just got to consider whether it's worth just refinishing the fingerboard. But then, you know, prices go up, and also you lose all that wear and tear, that play wear that's so pretty on a vintage fingerboard. So continue with that all the way through. Okay, this is a tricky one. I'm using solder to heat up the fret because it transfers the heat quickly and effectively. And these are stubborn. There we go. You see how quick you can actually scorch the underside. Now that's not actually the, badly burnt or anything. That's perfect. That's fine. You got to be super quick. You can't linger too long with the soldering iron on maple. There we go. It's difficult to get underneath these really low frets because they are so low, and so there's nothing that I can really grab with my pullers, which are really sharp and flush. So typically you got to grab them really tight and then just pull up, and these ones just pop out, and I'm not getting any significant tear out because I'm heating it up. It's a tough one. There we go. Right, I'll carry on and do the rest. Cool, so I've done all the frets, I pulled them out. The next I want to clean out these slots, and you can see there's just a lot of bits of lacquer and roughness to the fret slot. So I'm going to start by protecting the main fretboard area. I'm literally putting the tape down, oh gosh, probably 0.5 millimeter to the outside of where the fret was seated, and I'm taking a little bit of sandpaper and I'm just gonna hit the top of this just to smoothen it out. I'm not pushing hard, and this is about 220 grit, or worn out 220 grit, and I'm just hitting the top of this just to get that roughness out. And then I'm going to take this squared file and just hit the edges and round this off. So what I'm going to do is, before I seat frets, I want to hit these areas with a little bit of gunstock oil with amber tint, just to clear up any lightness that may appear on the outside of the new fret when it's in. There we go. And what I'll just leave it like that. Come in and do the next one. Man, you go through a lot of tape in a workshop. Now, why do we roll the fingerboard edge? Because the underside of a fret, the little corner between the fret itself and the tang beneath it, isn't perfectly square, and just doing that creates a surface that won't push up against, you know, trying to almost put a square peg in a round hole scenario. So you're kind of rounding off the hole, if that makes any sense. I'm going to continue doing this all the way up, and then I'll come back when we do just the tinting of that area. Alright, so what I've done is I've mixed up a little bit of true oil and 3 drops of amber tint. It always looks darker than it actually is. And a little bit of paper towel, not too much. And literally just wiping onto the spots, just like that, and that's it. And there you have it. So it makes for a much cleaner look. That line you see is a little bit of lacquer. Also lacquer there, so the frets, the fret wire should. Sorry, I'm not using the lacquer part. I'm not using the gunstock oil. I'm just wiping the top here. But that's a lot tidier. So. Okay, so I've done the slots and I've cleaned out the edges and done that tinting with the gunstock oil with the amber tint. Quite happy with it. I prepared the edges of the slots, and now I'm just going to prepare the depth of the slots as well. So I've gone ahead and I've trimmed all the frets. I'm using Jescar, I think it's 55090, which is the same as Dunlop 6105. It's one of my favorite size of fret wire. And yeah, so I'm using the Japanese fret saw, and I'm going to use this depth stop on it to cut the fret slots to depth. I don't want to go too deep, so I'm taking the tang of one of the frets and I'm just getting it there. Now it wiggles around a bit, so you got to find that happy spot. Check both sides quickly. Yeah, I'm happy with that. Obviously the time of putting in the first fret, I'll check if I've gone deep enough. I'd rather be too shallow at first and have to pull that fret out than go too deep. Cool. I'll move that out the way, and I'll just show you one or two. So I'm being careful to stay in the slot. And typically when I roll over to the front, I do the pull stroke so that I don't push any wood out from that side. And when I come down, then roll down this edge this way, I'm going to be pushing
to stop any pull out on this side. So that's where I'm going there. Sometimes these slots can get a little bit tight, and you know, gotta work with it a little bit. Nice and clean, and then the fret wire will sit nicely in there. Let's double check. I think that's good. Okay, I'm going to quickly test out this first fret slot, and I'm going to use jaws for this. I've put in the 7¼ inch radius core. I want to do this quickly with jaws, and then what I'll do is I'll bang in all the rest with my fret press. But I'm using liquid hide glue, just the stuff from a Tight Bond make. It's got a lovely amber color to it as well, so as it dries it'll also fill up any little spots that I need to fill, and keep with the color right next to the fret. So what I do is I use a toothpick and I just drop some in the top like so. Why I do the gluing now, and why hide glue or fish glue, is it just has a longer working time than super glue, and it allows me to do a primary level check with the frets before it all sets, and that just allows me to get a decent kind of level before having to level, and saves me from having to take a lot of material off the top of the frets, which is pretty cool. It just makes my life easier down the track. So yeah, fret number 1. Let's see. I've already pre-radiused this fret wire when I cleaned it off. Trying to show you this. Sometimes it's a little awkward to have to be bound by the camera visual plane. Some healthy kind of oozing out there, which I will wipe away. And yeah, it looks like my sawing out of the fret slot was bang on. So I'll just get some paper towel and clean that off, and then I'll just keep going. Alright, so I ended up using the jaws press for everything up the neck until I've kind of come towards the tapering off on the neck heel, and now I've switched over to the press. I've gone ahead and put hide glue into all of the remaining slots so that I don't have to move things around all the time. But yeah, press is such a straightforward thing. It's really cool to use, and you really don't have to apply a whole lot of pressure to get them in. That was my floor creaking. Such a nice feeling. It just sort of pops in. You can feel the fret sort of squeezing in, and then it just sort of gives way and seats, and you kind of want to stop there unless you're actually trying to seat it when it's sort of resisting you. It's very easy to overcook it with the fret press because it's so easy to apply pressure. So you really don't want to push the fret and compress the wood beneath it, because then it's just going to make your life more difficult. You either got to pull that fret, reseat it again, or reseat a new one, or you're going to have to level everything down to that level, which is a pointless exercise, because then, you know, you've just gone and refretted, to give yourself more fret height on the guitar. And then you're taking your whole lot off. So quickly they go in eventually. When I use super glue, I wick it down the edge of the fret, down the end of the fret. So obviously not when there's binding. And that sets fairly quickly, so I'm able to finish a refret in a day. And when I use hide glue, I let it sit overnight, typically, to just settle up. The last one. That's it. Do some cleanup, and then double check all my levels. So one of the critical things I do before the glue is dried is go around with a fret rocker and double check that there's no surprises, and also just sight down all my frets and make sure there's no gaps. So these things happen so easily, you overlook something and then it's glued in. Yeah, so just like so, bit of a rocking on there. Imagine you do this when it's dry and it's time to level. These high spots, you're not having to level out these high spots. I think there's a piece of lacquer underneath it. That's better. And so on. Once it's, and I'll leave it to set overnight for the glue to dry. And then I'll happily trim and level. Great stuff. Alright, so this has had plenty of time to cure, and I'm going to go through and trim the ends and do a light bevel of the ends and then a light level. And here we go. Now I use a fret leveling file. It's actually a fingerboard leveling file from StewMac. The guys at Crimson Guitars also sell these kind of things. I find instead of using one of the ones that's got a set angle to the file, and I think it's a piece of nylon that it's set into, I just like to have control over this, and I just feel it along the way. So I'm going to hold it at this angle.
I just like to have control over this, and I just feel it along the way. So I'm going to hold it at this angle.
Come back and roll it back almost perpendicular, just to get those fret tangs. Obviously being very careful with the edge of the fingerboard. Bit of glue down there. you can feel the difference in the resistance. You know, when you start to get to where the surfaces are meeting, and you've removed enough fret to where it's in line with the surface of the edge of the neck, the whole feel of the file changes and the sound changes. Now I also use a piece of maple with some 220 grit stuck to it. This is very, very flat. This just helps me get rid of the file chatter and begin that finishing process. It just starts to polish the edge of the fret. Obviously, being very careful not to sand the edge of the edge of the neck. I mean, it's near impossible, but then I have a piece with 800 on it, and I mean, this is literally just polishing. Now, I haven't leveled yet, I haven't done any dressing yet, but I'm just taking care of things along the way, polishing these edges while I can. And I could do this later, but why not now? So a lot of this will polish away and clean up once we're done. And if I need to, I can just mix a little bit of amber tint with a little bit of gunstock oil or true oil, or whichever you call it, and just rub it down the side just to reseal anything that's had to be sanded, just to neaten it up and make it invisible where I've touched it with a, you know, be it the file or, you know, sanding block or whatever. So I'm being careful, but I'm not precious about the edge. I'm going to go ahead and dress the ends just before I do a level, because I'm going to level under full string tension, and by that putting the neck back onto the guitar, stringing it up and leveling it with the strings on it. And so getting this done now is just handy for me. It doesn't affect the final product. At the end, it all kind of comes together. Taping it off, and I come from the bottom so that I can get all those burrs up from the bottom, like so. And then I come up from the bottom underneath as well, just to catch whatever burr there is to make it as smooth as possible. And see, this is the handy thing of the neck being off the body at this stage. Flip it around, all sorts of things. My crazy kids in the background there. Like so. I'm just going to show you this one fret. You know, taking your time and doing this carefully just gives you a better result. Now at this stage there are these peaks up at the top, up here up at the top, and when I end up leveling and then recrowning, I will roll over just a tiny bit from the top and just smoothen that and make it into a little softer. So that's that. I'll carry on and then check back in when I put the neck back on and do the leveling. Now if you don't have a neck jig, I just want to show you something that I built for myself. I do have a neck jig, but I like to use this just easy and quick. I made this little stand that I clamped to my bench, and it enables me to attach the guitar to it, and I'll show you in another video once I've attached the guitar, and do some leveling in the playing position. Alright, so this is the way that I level under string tension. I have this little, it's like a brace or something that I've created, and I chose this angle. You know, it was nothing precise, it was just, you know, hey, that's your tummy and your guitar's lying against your tummy, and that's kind of the most common angle that a guitar will be at in the playing position. You know, this could be weather stripping, you know, the foam stuff with the adhesive on the back that you can buy from your Lowe's or your B&Q or wherever it is, Bunnings in Australia, whatever your hardware is. Yeah, and I just clamp it with a quick grip clamp to my workbench, and then I clamp the guitar into it. Now obviously I set this distance based on the fact that I could get clamps around a Strat or a Tele. With the carved top guitars it's a little different, and I need to use different clamps and stuff, but I have these little mini quick grip clamps that I also use, and I literally just clamp the guitar in. Actually, I do it this way so I don't poke myself when I'm working on the guitar. Like so, and like so. There we go. She's clamped in. It just means I don't have to hold it up while I'm working on it. Now before I tune up, I am going to insert this behind the nut, underneath the strings right over there. And basically I took two Starbucks stirrers, wooden stirrers. I glued them together and clamped them to one of my radius blocks so that I have a permanent curve. And I just basically insert this guy right there. This just gives me string clearance. Now I tune the guitar. Okay. Now let's get this neck straight. I'm being careful not to apply too much pressure while doing this. I move it around a little bit to feel where the resistance is. You know, where's it rubbing up against? And you can feel when it starts, when it's still touching on either end, or you can also feel how it starts to really swivel when it's only touching in the middle on one end. So I'm almost there. Now there's an ever so slight twist in this neck. Not twist, it's just slightly more curved on the bass end than the treble side. So whereas it's super straight on this side and still a slight amount of relief on the bass side, you got to find that compromise. In the end, the tops of the frets will be what's level, and we're under string tension on this guitar with 10 gauge strings, the gauge that the owner wants. So excuse me, I'm happy with that. Right, so I use Rectify Master Light. It's just an I-beam, and it's got some 220 grit sticky paper attached to the back, and making sure that your pickups are not going to get hit by the sandpaper. That would be a rookie error. That should do it. Let's go. Start here. Now, obviously the tops of my frets I've marked out with permanent marker before I strung her up. I'm not even applying much pressure at all. And I'm trying to keep this on top of every single fret the whole time. Let's have a look. You can tell immediately this way as well how your neck is adjusted. So let's go down to the bottom and see the treble side where we're at. Without taking off too much material at first and just becoming a cowboy with this, I can also say, okay, look, I need to release the truss rod a little bit. Yeah, so nothing's getting touched over here. The third fret and on's getting touched. Then we've got a bit of a gap here where it's not touching, and then at the end it's touching there. So on the treble side, it's touching all the way from the third fret up. Right, so I'm going to release the truss rod just a tiny bit. That should do it. Have another go and see where we're at. There we go. I can always come back, so let's move it along. So I want to get them level and take off the least amount of material in the process. It's worth noting that once I've done this, I'm going to take off the strings and I'm going to take a radius block. This is a 7 1/4 inch radius. I'm going to take a radius block and I'm going to create a fall away before I recrown the frets, because I can't really create a fall away now because this is straight. So I'll get this as straight as possible, flat, and then create a fall away later, which will help with clearance up from the top frets. Simple process, eh? But you need to take a lot of care. Now I've got the Erlewine neck jig, which I do use from time to time, especially when I need to work on fingerboards. I just find that really helps me true up fingerboards, you know, a neck that's warped. Leveling a board before new frets go in, for instance, I might do that. But typically this is a way more simple jig to rig up, and this has made my life a little easier because I'm not holding the guitar up. I used to hold the guitar in the playing position and then do this. It just made no sense. This way at least there's no variables. Now I'm moving, as you can see, I'm moving this a little bit up and a little bit down, but keeping it parallel with the edges of the fingerboard. So a little bit of a dip here. Yeah, we're looking good. You see, now if I didn't take care in seating the frets properly when the glue was still curing, the glue is still wet at least, I would be taking off a whole lot more material on one or two of the frets, and this task would be a lot more laborious. Now it's just hints of irregularities and spending less time on this process, which means it won't be breaking my back on the crowning process, which is so much easier if you've taken less material off and there's not such a wide flat spot on the fret wire. I'm applying a bit more pressure here. And if I'm applying pressure here over the body area, over the body joint, it's not pushing the neck back and taking it out of a straight position. Okay, I've got something low over here. I've got something low over there. And other than that, I'm okay. So I'll keep going a touch more. Okay. Alright. I can see that I'm starting to hit those spots, and then I'll stop. Let's see. I'll just work my way down. Just a touch more. And I'm not too phased if I flatten the radius just a tiny bit in this area, you know, almost making it slightly more compound, because that'll assist with the bending and make the guitar a little bit more playable. I'm basically just almost just resting my fingers on this side, just to make sure that it's stable. All right. That's that done. Now I'm happy with that. I'll take the guitar out of the playing position, hang this gear up over here, and take the neck off once I've just leveled in a little bit of a fall away over there. That's my bench clear again. Okay, couple of things. I've protected the pickups, just a little bit of tape, and I've taken about 3 pieces of tape and taped them over around the 12th fret, just to let me focus on that area and almost create that angle. I mean, it's not a lot, but it's enough to make a bit of a difference. So yeah, I am resting the headstock on a little block, so there is a little bit of applied pressure on the back of the headstock. I'm not paying too much attention right now to how straight the neck is, but I know it hasn't settled back super far, and all I'm doing is creating the fall away. So I'm actually using a 9.5 inch block, and that's just that I have a bit more control over what I'm doing and where I'm leveling. And you know, if I create like that little bit more of a compound feel up at the top here, that's fine for me. I think that's fine. I'll take the neck off now and recrown these frets. One more tip from me as well is that I try and keep the old strings so that I can do the leveling with the old strings on and not ruin a set of strings, but only if they're the same gauge that we're using for the final setup, and that just means that I can chuck this set away now. Alright, so I've actually done the crowning and polishing on every fret bar one, just to show you. And so what I do is I tape it off to protect the board, and then I tuck in with a diamond file. I prefer the straight one that I have. I've got this tape on it to protect the neck if I happen to drop beneath, and and then I keep an eye on that little line on the top of the fret that was revealed in the leveling, and just make that go away, always rounding over. I don't want to make a big, another flat spot on top. And then that edge and that end and that end, and once I'm happy with that, I switch over to this, what is I think 400 grit, but it's kind of worn out on the sponge, and I kind of do go over the end like that, and I'm not going right onto the maple, but I am rounding it over, and I am kind of in the face of the fret on the other side. And so I'm happy with that. I've got this 800 grit with a foam back. Carry on with that. You know what, guys, I've tried the fret erasers. I've tried so many methods and so many different grits, and I've gone and done a 6-stage process and a 5-stage process, and you know what, I've just kind of figured my thing out. And then I use this old 3M pad. Don't ask me what grit it used to be, because it's so dirty from polishing frets, but it must be around the 2000 grit mark or something like that, even more. No, it must be about the 10,000 mark. And then that's what it looks like, and it's nicely cleaned off on the ends. And try and give you a there you go. Brush it off, and then I can clean the ends and touch up where need be, and that's it. I'll carry on with the setup. I popped this nut back in when I had to string it up, but I can pull this nut out and redo the nut because I'll need to. It's not glued in anymore. There you go. Next up, nut. Alright, so I took a bone nut blank. The underside of this nut was a 9.5 inch radius though, so I had to make it a 7.25 inch because the nut slot is 7.25 inch. Got her fitted. She's still oversized though, width wise and height. So the trusty shave down pencil trick. There you go. And go ahead and get us close. So I'll put that on the back of the nut vise and shape her down. Get her fitted nice and snug on the sides, and polish the sides nicely, and get us close to cutting the slots. Alright, so it's all prepared, nice and shiny on the edges, and she fits nice and snug, nice and clean on the edges. Super glue, just 2 little dots is all I want. Goes a long way. There we go. Nice and snug. Let that sit for a minute. I will put the body back on, or put the neck back on the body, and then cut the nut slots. Alright, so these 70s necks are usually pretty narrow. A lot of Fender necks are normally 43 millimeters. This is 40. So I'm going to give her a halfway mark, 20 mils. And then get my spacing rule out and decide where I want to go in terms of the spacing. that should do it. It's a little wider than before. Actually, no. Don't take chances, boy. We don't want strings slipping off the edge. Okay. That looks pretty good. There we go. I'll cut some primary slots and then get the strings on. I've still got the old strings on, so I think I'm just going to use them for this and then do the setup with these strings and see how we go. Put a fresh set on before I polish her up right at the end. Save the set. I've cut the slots to a specific depth, almost all the way there, and I just want to bring down the top of the nut because the slots are getting a bit deep, and I want to get it to the point that we're close to the final height of the top of the nut, and then I'll polish the top as well, and then I'll cut the final slot depth when I do the final setup. That looks pretty good to me. And I think that's really pretty. You see, you don't need the strings to sit very deep, especially on the bass side. That's how I like them to look in the end. Okay, well, she's done. And I'm well pleased with the outcome. I think it looks pretty cool. Let's look at the nut. I like the way the frets turned out. There you go. She's pretty playable now, and I'm well pleased. So, well, thanks for watching. This one's done, and I'm pretty happy. I think it looks great and plays great. And if you would be so cool as to subscribe, that would be awesome. And like the video. Have an awesome one, and I'll see you next time. Cheers.